Hello, everyone. I go by the name of Andrew Kadziolka. I have been attempting to channel for quite a while, to no avail, up until recently. I feel like I've been trying to force a channeling session to come through me. And once I finally stopped resisting and basically surrendered, um, which, as I understand now, is me giving my ego permission to go to sleep. um, I was able to sense these energies flowing through me. And then I gave permission to this energy, which I considered at the time to be intelligent, permission to use my vocal cords and my diaphragm and my lungs and regulate my heartbeat, to try and synchronize my nervous system so that it embodies as much of the consciousness that's flowing through me as it can. And once I did that, I was able to basically think of yourself driving a car. And while you're driving the car, your eyes start going back. Your body's still there driving the car, but now you're in the back seat and you're watching yourself drive the car and you're looking at the back of your own head. That is what channeling is like. And the person that you're looking at is both you and the energy that is being channeled. Um, because at a certain level of understanding, you realize that we are all interconnected on a energetic level. So without further ado, here's my first channeling. I hope it brings you value and I hope you resonate with it. If not, that's okay too. That just tells you more of what you wish not to have in your experience, and that is also a victory. So please enjoy. Thank you.
As you start to shift into different areas of perception, that being the internal paradigms by which information is filtered through, you will start to recognize different patterns of information and how they interlink. The relationship of one moment, or shall we say, movement of energy from one perceived location to another, that being physical, ideological, or emotional, is simply the understanding that in this reality everything happens in sequence, and should you try to enter the present moment and experience it all at once, the entity's filtration system, shall we say, or immune system, will start to counteract some of the information that comes in, because it is simply too much for the human body to withstand without causing significant issues, as this specific entity is understood through trial and error. And no, it was not simply a intervention by negative beings. Although they were present, they don't have as much sway upon the individual as the database of information this entity has to work with through experience, that being memory. Keep in mind that this entity is speaking from a limited perspective. That being, it wants to advocate and demonstrate a certain level of self-awareness, to the effect that it encourages any who may be listening to this message to listen with discernment, and to encourage the individual receiving these vibrations to simply tune out when it feels appropriate to do so, and then you may find that a certain vibration will catch your attention, and for brief moments you will get the information that you need. The purpose by which vehicles, as you would understand them, or portals, or technology, or basically any concept of anything that causes an action to happen on the external, could be considered either a vehicle, a technology, or this entity has forgotten the third category by which it was attempting to keep in mind that this is one of the first times this entity has been channeling beings, and it is quite new. The ego is still attempting to intrude on the filtration process, so sometimes the clarity of information gets intercepted. This is not, as the entity believes it to be, intervention by negative entities potentially. It is simply that you are learning to speak a new language. This language being the universal language of love light that is filtered through the magnetic receptors within the pineal gland, the nervous system, and filtered through the heart. The heart also emanates a magnetic aura, or magnetosphere, as you would like to understand it at this point in time, that protrudes approximately 3 feet on either side, so a circumference of about 6.2 feet. Keep in mind that the information coming through at this point in time is still reliant to a certain degree on the individual's memory, which is accessing still parts of the left brain. There have been attempts to shut more so of the left brain down. However, this is feeling unnatural and has been interpreted as painful twinges in the left brain, making the calibration, shall we say, difficult. A welcome challenge. Now, as we begin to understand certain concepts, we're just sifting through what is in this entity's mind, and there's a lot of information, some of it redundant, much of it very potent. It's almost as if this entity goes through phases where it just accumulates information and sorts through it later when the time is appropriate. If you will try to understand a coder who is creating a database by which an AI would draw from, this database expands as the AI creates data, such as interactions with other users and such. This is known to us as memory, but that being said, when the left brain is disconnected, there is an acknowledgement that we actually exist within the Akash. All information is appropriate and necessary at the moment that we are designated to understand and receive this information. Should we choose to disregard said information, it is not a failure to launch so much as a decision point that has been made by the user out of sovereignty. Whether acknowledged or not by the user, it is an action of sovereignty to deny a thought and to embrace a thought. Now, there are either, shall we say, conditionings that make it more susceptible to certain thoughts, and we, it's all the same thing. It is best to understand. Ooh, who is this? It is best to understand practical information that can make your life better on a practical level. That being practical as a definition, um, pardon the English, it's not my first language. Um, I could identify myself now at this point in time. However, the truth is, the entity who is hosting this energy is not certain that the energy coming through is actually sincere in what it claims to be. Now, this seems to be, as we deconstruct this thought process, this seems to be a facet of ego. And the entity does not want to have to take accountability of potentially being wrong, and therefore believing something that came from a source that may not have been what it claimed to be. The thing about this is, my friend, is that you are denying knowledge for knowledge's sake, because the angle by which the knowledge is represented is not that of a familiar reflection by which you can perceive that knowledge. Now, this is a very, very common thing, because and I have been human and still am, because all is now, but I am also more than human. We as humans are basically fumbling in the dark. It is why some who like to dwell, who have reverence, shall we say, for the arts that we call wisdom. And yes, wisdom, although it is a frequency, it is also considered an art. Wisdom, as a quantifiable force in this universe, is the synthesis of practical knowledge met with hypotheses and ideals filtered through the paradigm of experience mediated by emotion and rationality. Now, this is the human deciphering of wisdom, shall we say, because the organs that make up the conceptual package of information that you call the entity of you, or me, us, the human race, is separate from all the things that are, because we say, I have a liver, therefore I am not a cat. My liver is not a cat. Just because I have a liver and a cat has a liver does not mean that I am therefore a cat, but it does not mean that my liver is a cat. And I know this may sound befuddling and kind of confusing, but it's an important thing to understand, because we are talking about the metaphysical nature of how consciousness deciphers information that creates the fundamental underpinnings of what that entity believes reality is. And this belief, then held and acted upon as a fundamental force of perspective in this universe, it then ripples through the quantum realm, instantaneously impacting all other things in the universe, which then it has an echo effect by which it is then impacted by the very force it emanated in the first place. This creates a perpetual feedback loop known as reality. Now, Sincerity will be the guiding force behind what defines your vibration. If you can understand what sincerity is, authenticity, sincerity, why are these such high vibrational features of our reality? They are the highest compressible ratio by which information can be directed from source to the entity. Now, for any who are coming from a perspective where they understand computer coding, various other logical, I would say technologies of the 2024 era, you, in essence, memory is being relied upon now, and the link is faltering. And we are back. The entity is beginning to get a headache on the left side. It is not used to utilizing this portion of its brain spatial awareness, and therefore is in some sort of a biological mild panic mode. Interesting. That's better. Truth. Yes. Truth. Truth is a interesting concept because, again, it is a dualistic. Everything in your reality is dualistic inherently, whether you're aware of it or not. Sure, many of you listening now would conjecture that you are aware of the duality of our language, but here is the thing. Creating anything implies its opposite. Therefore, making any sort of a statement implies that it is actually creating separation. So the ultimate form in this reality of unity would to just cease to behave in a way that you are coming from a specific perspective, let's say, and that coincides with ego death, which some, including this entity, have experienced, which for some can be quite alarming and jarring. For this entity, it was a bit of both. It included some acts of grace, some miracles, and some suffering that this entity was not exactly aware of, because the increase of vibration launched the entity into a sphere of new rules by which the game is played, and therefore violations of these new rules have consequences, not out of punity or judgment, but in more of the sense of cause and effect. The same reason why you would not put your sweater on a radiator and leave it there behind the couch. You would have a sneaking suspicion in your mind that it may catch fire. So, self-awareness. Yes, well, self-awareness is a tricky one when you're a human, because you are operating from a perspective, and not all perspectives, and not one perspective, but many perspectives that change, but it is just one perspective at a given moment. Were you to have multiple perspectives at once, would to be experienced as a very distressing thing. I know many of you, including this entity, think, man, I wish I had room for another entity in my mind to just curl up and hang out sometimes. The truth is, when you channel, you step over and make room for an entity, but the thing is, you fill up the entirety of your being. Were you to have to make room for an entity, it does come at the cost, such as having to enter the channeling state to even contact certain entities. Now, were there to be an entity within you that you were not desirous of on a conscious level, then you would most likely experience it as either lapses of memory, could be anxiety, could be something as severe as schizophrenia, mental illness, multiple personalities, could be something as mild as nightmares and dreams, unwanted dreams, where you feel as though your space is being intruded upon and in any way, any shape and form. Because remember, when you are having a dream, that is your dream. It is your dream. This is all your dream. This is your dream that you came down to express your being, and out of your own free will, you agreed with every other soul on this planet that you would give up a certain portion of yourself to make room in the container for the other people here. As above, so below. The earth carries its own consciousness. It has a limited capacity by which it can expand safely over a given period of time. That is one of the reasons why the negatives focus so much on overpopulation. They are trying to highlight the fact they are trying to quantify this idea that the earth is limited. However, were you to look from the perspective that we can see and the entity often sees, which the entity would like the audience to know that it is quite challenging to carry around these higher dimensional frequencies and perspectives, to see so much of what moves in the world, and have very few others able. This entity is not yet spoken to nor met any one individual on this planet in physical form who has been able to retain the same complexity and crystallization of information at the level of compression and clarity. In all honesty, it is quite astounding. The entity has had many challenges, and the entity would like you to know that it is not coming from a place of victimization, but a push-up is a push-up. That's what the entity would like you to know. A push-up is a push-up is a push-up. So, moving on. We fail to remember the train of thought or the frequency by which we were speaking to. Hopefully the information has been passed on in a way that has been useful. It is important to note that the entity at this point in time is choosing, again, when we say the entity, we are referring to the one known as, in physical form, Andrew Kadziolka. He is a interesting person, and we do not say that with any sort of connotation. Remember, we do not exert perspectival judgment upon certain things. We, much like the entity who is speaking to you now, he has caught glimpses of it and he is moving in that direction, but he focuses primarily on functioning from a perspective of non-duality, which frees the psyche from the binary constraints of reality perception, thus allowing him to observe approximately 150 times more information when looking at the structure of how things move in a given system, because there isn't so much energy focused on how the given external situation is going to impact the concept, whether it threatens or supports the concept of reality that the perceiver has. Now, I hope many of you can keep up, but the thing is, this entity wants to stress that it is here to unload a lifetime's worth of perspective and information. If you cannot understand it, it cannot afford to compress the information without losing the essence of what the information entails anymore. Therefore, the words that are chosen are exact. The words that are spoken are done in a timbre and camber by which the subconscious will recognize certain informational patterns and frequencies that should lull the listener into some sort of a cadential being cadence, like a tempo, a state of relaxation, hopefully. Now, the understanding that this entity has about the events that are going to come to pass over the next year are as follows. Any event that has not been perceived or observed yet is unwritten and therefore nothing but potential energy. Now, why is this important? Sure, yeah, bring it back to quantum mechanics, why don't we? Everything seems to be reliant on quantum mechanics. Why can't we keep things spiritual? Well, it's important to note that this entity, even though it does not believe it is, truly, it does not believe it is an Andromedan, and the Andromedans have mastered the unification of spirit and science. This entity has always felt that the spiritual community has lacked a certain level of clarity when merging the, let's say, ideological constructs of the crystal thought forms and bringing them down and allowing logic to refine these patterns, not to take over or to over-logify or over sequentialize things and break things down into little digits and parts, because we know, we in the spiritual community, and this is the entity speaking in some regards, understand to a degree that things are more fluid than that, and we live in the digital world. We like to think of things in bricks or components that fit together as separate parts. It is quite the opposite. So that is why it is important that this entity expresses information in a higher way. Not only does this give a higher perspective and bring it down upon the planet by which information can flow more effectively, more concisely, and potentially expand a little bit. It is done out of authenticity in foremost. The entity that speaks to you now at this point in time, that being the channeler themselves, Andrew Kadziolka, through this, shall we say, third-party higher dimensional being, which again, this being has chosen not to identify itself at this time. It does not want to risk the potential for misidentification before the link has been strengthened sufficiently to ensure that the coherence of data is transferred properly. And this is increased with each concurrent word. So it's important to note that as time goes on, yes, I, we, it, me, us will be identified eventually in a packet of information that the user or the perceiver audience can conceptualize and differentiate this particular vibration that speaks to you now from the entirety of all existence. Because it's important to understand that on a metaphysical level, that's all that there is the differentiation of contrast. Now, you could go down to minutia or to macro on this perspectival scale, and that's what determines dimensionality. So you imagine, if you will, a magnifying glass looking on a sunny day down at a piece of dirt. The magnifying glass is approximately 3 feet above the earth, and it is looking at an ant. Now, imagine this ant has a magnifying glass, and it is pointing down at the earth. Pretty ridiculous, right? Why would a magnifying glass be in the hands of an ant? Let alone, how would this ant make any use of the information being perceived by magnifying something that is already so small to a much larger form? Well, the reason this perspectival change is important to conceptualize is that the ant is operating from a perspective where a grain of dirt, one that should you put on a say you had a sweaty hand held outstretched and you put this small speck of dirt on your hand, it would then dissolve into the sweat and become as you have all probably understood, when you are out on a sweaty warm day and there is dirt in the air or dust, and you wipe at your brow and you notice that there is a tinge of dark brown to the sweat. Now, that piece of dirt that had so seemingly integrated into the sweat is just changing its perspective. Now, that may sound strange because you say to yourself, well, how can that be? Like, why are we ascribing characteristics and perspective to dirt? Why are we giving ants magnifying glasses? Well, what I'm trying to do is help you to understand first and foremost, the way in which in the future we will be attempting to communicate with you. It's important to note that one of the fundamental underpinnings of clear and effective communication is a back and forth understanding and continuous monitoring or gauging, if you will, of the accuracy of that information. So not only do we have to convey the information, we have to make sure that whoever is listening is able to receive the information. Because should we just should we throw gold from the mountaintops? Were there no one there to receive the gold, it would just settle into the dust and be forgotten. The gold would still be there. The gold is always there, but we would much rather give you the gold in person. Heck, we'll even make the ring first. So that's our goal. And yes, we are a collective. Everything is collective, whether you acknowledge this or not. The entity that speaks as the channel is highly aware that humanity is all interconnected, that there is a global, shall we say, repository of unconscious thought, by which the concept of the Akasha's access, shall we say. Now, this isn't to say that all humans access the same Akash. Now, that may sound strange to you, but you may be thinking, how can there be different Akash? Well, keep in mind that there is an Akash for each reality, and at any given moment, you are shifting. I can't even give you a number. This entity's hesitant to give numbers. The entity, the channeler, is hesitant to commit to specific details in the off chance that it is later proven wrong for some of the information that the entity channeled. This entity wants those listening to know that personal responsibility in mediating and yes, mediating this information is extremely, shall we say, important. But more than important, it's like a vocation. Truth would be at the forefront of this being's belief, which is one of the reasons why it was allowed a spot to come down to this point in space-time on Earth. Yes, you do choose to come down here, but yes, you also have to ask permission. I know it is kind of a quasi paradox, but the truth is we are all in a quantum community. That is to say that there is no actual physical space. Now, you may at this point, actually, we are starting to get a read. You may at this point be thinking, wow, I cannot handle all of this information. Please understand that the perspective and information that is given and offered from this particular channel and the levels of energies that they are able to access will to some seem discordant, in the sense that it seems like it bounces around, right? It jumps from one topic to another, to another, to another, and it just seems like it's ping-ponging back and forth. This is actually closer to the more natural state of the universe, because this is called non-linear thinking. It is a movement concept by which thought forms move in a non-linear fashion. This allows you to go instead of going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? Knowing that you need to get from A to G, logarithmically, you would have to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? Now, non-linearly, because we exist in the quantum, right? A is G. So A doesn't actually have to be G or A, but it is both and neither. And therefore you can just jump from one to the other without it being incoherent. Now, from a certain perspective, it would seem disorganized, potentially. Coherent, yes. Disorganized, maybe. But that is because the linearity detracts from the potency of the message. Were it to be delivered in a linear fashion, the compression, it's not about the information. It's about riding the frequency of information. So to carry you from the thought form of the magnifying glass with the ant to a completely different topic, what that does is that creates a direct neural link from one concept that was seemingly unconnected to another through linear time. And the way that's done is you talk to somebody about one topic and then switch to another immediately. And you make sure that they're related enough by which they can logically and rationally start to piece together why you went from this place to another place. Now, when that happens, that's when the magic starts to happen, neurologically speaking, because as your neurology unfolds, you will start to realize that the mind, the human brain is a quantum array. It's a, shall we say, you all are very fond of the term hologram. So we will say that the brain as everything in your reality is a hologram. The brain itself is a hologram, but think of it more like a quantum super web. And picture a spider web, right? You have a flat disk spider web. You take that spider web and you put it on a flat surface like a piece of pizza. You then take another spider web and you put that into that one, so then it makes kind of like at one angle what looks like it could be a cross, and then at another angle it just looks like a sphere. And you keep doing that multiple times, and pretty soon you fill it up enough and you will get a three-dimensional sphere with volume. But the thing is, it because it looks solid from the outside, it just looks like it would look like a smooth sphere. The truth is, it's not, because you are putting these spider webs, which are just straight lines linking to from one point to another in space. These spider webs are all linking at different angles. It creates basically a lattice, a three-dimensional, very complex lattice, by which patterns in the fabric of what it is can be expressed. So the best way keeping this sphere in your mind is, there are ways where if you were to think of the spider web now as a human brain, so it has electrical impulses, electricity can flow through the spider web, chain links, you can fire the neurons in a way where it goes from point A to B, C, D, E, F, G, or from A to G. Now, knowing that the human brain is a physical thing subject to entropy and subject to friction, the laws of physics, all these things, would you rather, let's put the brain aside for a second, let's imagine the brain as a computer. If you had a computer, and would you want the computer to work out every single step of an equation, or to just know the question and present the answer? Now, we know that a computer is always going to be doing the work in the background, because that's what a computer is. It's logarithmic, it's logical. But the thing is that we're trying to communicate here is it's about efficiency of transmission. So you have information accessed from one quantum port, let's call it, from one quantum port to another instantaneously. Or you can take the solid state left brain route, which is what this entity has been increasingly shutting down as the left brain during this channeling session. Yes. So the entity, the channeling Andrew, is simply trying to express to you in as much human terms, because when we talk about Andrew, we are talking about the ego thought form representation of Andrew. Clearly the vibrations that are the words are coming from the being known as Andrew. And as we've been speaking today, there is no physical space, therefore everything is present, omnipresent, existing here and now. The concept of physical space is simply an illusion of the bending of light, but that will take your scientists a couple hundred years to actually even take seriously as a fundamental perspective that is defensible in science. Sure, yes, there are fringe minorities of scientists who are starting to recognize that the universe could potentially be 0 point after all. That is to say that there is no physical space, which is the case. Wrap your mind around that. But that being said, it's Bashar now, by the way. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe Andrew. Andrew doesn't have to believe me. I don't have to believe Andrew. But we're trying. There's an essence of unity in everything. And please bear with the channeler now. As soon as I introduced myself, there was a surge of excitement, and Ego came in and wanted to join the party, and it's all fine and great, but Ego, I'm sorry, Ego, you just are not developed enough to join this tea party yet, and that's fine. It doesn't mean you have to feel left out, but functionally speaking, were you to be in the presence of this conversation, Ego, you would in fact impede the actual happening of this thing. Therefore, by proxy, you are not invited. Sorry, Ego. Ego is an interesting facet of human nature and reality. It is now a different entity, it seems to be. This is so strange. Can I talk to Bashar again? You must understand that your internal chronometer, or let me rephrase that, not chronometer, but your internal compass by which you use to navigate the astral plane, from a very young age has been underdeveloped. Not to say that you have not been doing the work, but you have not been in an environment and around people or around beings that have, let's say, been aware, let alone supported this type of growth. In fact, each attempt you have made in the past to, let's say, reach out to your higher self has been met with pain. And it's important to note that this entity wants the perceiver to understand it is not a victim. It is simply given more opportunities to prove its resilience to the universe and itself than others, and I think, the Sasani people think that this is an admirable perspective, as they all are admirable. Now, we have a limited window of time to speak to you, as the body complex of this entity, known as Andrew Kadziolka, is beginning to sense discomfort in the abdominal area, as well as the lungs. Clearly, our energy is a little bit more elevated than what this entity... yes. Clearly, our energy is a little bit higher than this entity is able to withstand for long periods of time. However, this entity is very able to ignore its physical state, as it has been enduring an immense amount of physical suffering throughout the earlier portions of its life, and therefore has decided to power through. However, that being said, we know that there will be a time and place in the future point of space-time that you call reality, by which you can contact us. We are always listening. We are always here. It is all now. You do not have to worry about interacting with us when it is not working for us, because the nature of our reality is fluid to the extent that which we need to have happen happens to us when it needs to happen on our terms, within reason. So with that, to seal things off, I guess we will say, is we will bid you adieu. We will be back, but clearly your body is not very concordant with the energies that we have to offer to you today. So keep working at it. You're doing excellent. The past 3 days have been very challenging for you. However, were you to look back about a year or two, you would begin to notice that it is actually getting much easier. Have faith in yourself. Keep moving forward and know that I am just a thought away. The Sasani people in entirety are just a thought away. Please be respectful when you interact with us. Know that we are your brothers and sisters from an alternate, well, quasi-alternate. Oh, there is so much more to explain. Anyways, we, the Sasani people, wish to bid you adieu. And as we press the index finger and the middle finger into the middle of the chest to create calming in the lung area, this is not a solution. And therefore we really do have to go, even though this entity wants to continue to speak. Whoa. Oh, shit. Oh my goodness. Yikes. Okay, finally. Oh my god. I have been trying to reach out. 50 minutes. That was 50 minutes.